want to welcome everybody to OCPAC and especially welcome our statewide Facebook audience, I think a nationwide Facebook audience. And it's always a privilege to have you here. For the benefit of our Facebook crowd, I mistakenly started the meeting before we brought you on board. So we've already had our prayer and our pledge. So if you're eating lunch, you will have to pray for your own lunch. We're going to start today. We've had some good elections in Oklahoma County, and Brian Armstrong is here. And I've asked Brian if he would just tell us what's all going on in Oklahoma County. So Brian, if you would come up and just take about a minute or so.
I always like the or so. There's a reason why we don't need a third party. The reason is because the grassroots constitutional conservative movements are taking back the Republican Party and start that here. This past weekend, both Tulsa, Oklahoma County, and Canadian County held their county conventions, and it was nearly a clean sweep for the constitutional conservatives. So this is a good thing. In Oklahoma County, we elected a new chair, Mr. Ken Warner. A new vice chair, Ms. Galen Stupak. We elected a new state committeeman, Porter Davis, who I don't see here today, but give him a round of applause. And then yours truly was elected to the 5th District Congressional Committee. Am I missing anyone else? That's right, and Jane Schmidt was elected state committee woman. Thank you. These are names I wasn't given on the list. Montgomery.
Oh yeah, Valerie Little for freshman support woman.
Yeah, she kept her seat. But anyway, it was a good weekend. The conservatives, the constitutional conservatives, are going to retake this party. We're going to steer it back in the direction where it belongs, representing our founding principles as stated in the Declaration of Independence. And we're going to hold our elected officials accountable to those statements. God bless.
All right, our main speaker finally walked in. Thank you, Nathan, for being here today. Good to see you. Yeah. You can have sit anywhere. We have some open seats down front. If you and Sharon would like to come down. Sharon Brown, it's always great to have you here. And I'm sure it was Sharon who slowed you down there, Nathan. So, Charlie, before we get started with our speakers, Charlie Meadows, our President Emeritus, has, I think, a couple things to say about the book table.
Actually, there are many other things that I wanted to say, Bob, and you know how that works. Sorry. We'll do it this way. Okay. Last week, I urged everyone to consider making contributions to some of these candidates who are running for city council, mayor, and places like that. And so enough of you stood up to make me give $50 to each of them, and then many others gave different amounts. The reason I know is when I went to church Sunday morning, Margaret Best, who is the candidate for school board, came up to me and said, "Charlie, we got home," and I don't know if that was Friday or Saturday, and our mailbox was full of envelopes with checks in it. Did you have anything to do with that? And I said, well, there's more coming because I hadn't even done mine yet. And so I got that in the mail Monday and forgot to put a stamp on hers, so it came back. I had to resend it again. But that's what happens when you're too busy. I wanted to read this. This came to me this morning. It says, "Good morning. This is Stacy Peterson, Edmond Ward 4 Council. Cheryl and I want to let you know how deeply we appreciate everything OCPAC is doing for us. Your support and prayers truly mean the world to us. Thank you so much." Folks, you have to understand, in the past, the grassroots candidates have never had the funding. The establishment candidates have had the funding because it was an establishment with all the money that funded them. And we're changing the dynamic when we, as a lot of different people, donate smaller amounts. It makes a huge difference. And so anyway, I'm just going to say this real quickly. If there's anyone else that would like to contribute to these 6 candidates, 2 of them are ward council people in Oklahoma City, 2 in Edmond, Margaret Best School Board in Edmond, and the mayor of Edmond. We're in first or second place in every one of the primaries in these. And we just need to bring them in. We are going to root out the Bernie Sanders radical Marxist with time. And with your help, it'll really help. So if you'd like to do that, Lanny has got some more of these sheets. What it is, all 6 of their names and addresses, and on the back, a little on the second sheet, a contributor statement. If you want to make a contribution of any size, please hold your hand up real quickly. Here, and okay. All right. Lanny, you needed help. So, anyway, while they're, okay, I see help now. While these are being distributed, and thank you again so much, I wanted to bring this up. I mentioned this book right after I got back from Georgia. It is called Live Not by Lies, a Manual for Christian Dissidents. On the way back home from Georgia, my wife and I spent a night with Dr. Cal Beisner and his wife. One of the things that night included was a tour of his personal library, which is now down to 6,000 volumes. And he's read them all. Okay? While he was here for the few days that we didn't get snowed out, he mentioned this book everywhere we went. And he said, I rank this in the top 12 most important books to read. What this book actually is an interview, and this was just written last November or December. It was an interview of literally hundreds of Christians that live behind the Iron Curtain. And it is testimonies of how they learned not to compromise their faith, and how they learned to push back, and how they eventually were able to escape. The first part of it is more of an education on the difference between hard tyranny and soft tyranny. Hard tyranny would be represented by the book Brave New World. Soft tyranny by, what's the other one? Help me somebody. 1984, thank you. And he believes that the church in America is not well prepared to understand the strategy of soft tyranny. Soft tyranny is what we're under right now. And if it doesn't work, they'll move it to hard tyranny. So it's a vitally important book. And I've got some. We picked up 50 copies Monday, and the price is $24. That's our cost. We bought these from a small independent bookstore, not ordering them online through Amazon. Got an idea why? We have empowered our enemies, what's turning out to be our enemies. And as Bill Federer came through here and said in his book, The History of Socialism, through whatever his name was.
Lenin?
No. The philosopher, long time ago.
Oh, George Hegel.
No, even further back than that. Anyway,
Plato.
Plato. From Plato to the present. Thank you. I knew you enough guesses. You get it, Bob. As Bill Federer taught us, every time, and this was a survey of history of what happens when socialists, progressive communists, whatever you want to call them, take over. And every time they take over, they only want 2 classes. A ruling class and the ruled class. And the class they've got to get rid of is the middle class. And why do they have to get rid of it? It's the only group that might have the chance to rise up and the resources to challenge their power. Well, where do the resources come from for the middle class? It's the small businesses that they own. Why do you think in this last COVID relief thing there wasn't a penny for restaurants and gyms and small businesses like that? So there's a reason we bought these from a small businessman, a bookstore. Too many times, out of convenience, folks, we've decided to get our stuff, have it delivered to us, and we leave the small businessmen in town floundering. So we're trying to correct that. Thank you, Bob.
So that was our 1 minute with Charlie. But it's great having Charlie. He's quite a preacher. And I remember the old days when he led OCPAC, I just loved to hear, just to watch him burn. It was great. Just throw a match there and he's on fire for as long as you want him. Okay, I think we're finally to where we can get some of our speakers in. And we have Jim Olson from the eastern part of the state. Jim, were you ever a pastor?
No, sir.
Okay, well, we're not in trouble. So you can speak for 1 or 2 minutes and you know what time looks like. Okay. So Jim is running a bill that Pastor Paul Blair initially ran, I think 5 years ago or so. I worked very hard on, and Governor Fallon vetoed it. She had promised to sign it. I think she just got confused and signed the wrong line. I don't know. Giving her a lot of credit. But Jim is running a very similar bill, and he's also running some bills in the House that Nathan's running in the Senate that you're about to hear about. So welcome, Jim Olson.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here, and I am excited about House Bill 1102. And so once again, I'm Representative Jim Olson from the eastern part of the state. If you were to take I-40 to Arkansas, right before you hit Arkansas, you hit Sequoia County. But it's great to be here. You know, thinking as Christian conservatives, we're concerned with many, many, many issues. The Bible touches every area of life. Having said that, I can't help but believe that the issue that is nearest to the heart of God is to stop the murder of unborn innocent babies. So, this did start several years ago before I got to the Capitol, and continued when I started. It was House Bill 1182, now it's House Bill 1102. House Bill 1102 would take away the license of any physician that performs an abortion in the state of Oklahoma. The only exception is the life of the mother, but I'm very excited about it. The reason it's based on physician licensure, which the courts have consistently around the country ruled that is under the purview of not the federal government, but the states. So we feel very encouraged that it has a strong chance to pass. I am expecting to present it on it did pass committee this year. I'm expecting to present it on the floor of the House this coming week. So if you think about it, pray about that. And so I'm very excited about that. From there, it should go to the Senate and on to the governor. I'm praying and believing that it'll work out well that way. I am privileged to work with Senator Dahm on several bills. And there are a couple of abortion bills. There's one on the Second Amendment, state preemption. We're declaring that a locality cannot decide that they want stricter gun laws than the state allows. And so, but I appreciate working with Senator Dahm. My secretary a few days back, she said, Senator Dahm's office called, and they want to know if you'll be the House author on, I can't remember the bill number. I said to her, well, I'm sure I do, but let me just go ahead and read the bill anyway. And so as a formality, I read the bill, and I said yes. And the reason that I'm so confident in him, I know his worldview comes from the Constitution, from the Declaration of Independence, and even more important than that, from God's Word, the Bible. And so I appreciate being here. May the Lord bless you.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate it. This is what it means to disciple the nations. Preachers preach the gospel, they disciple their members, and some people, like Jim Olson, run for office, and they begin to shape culture. And some of those run for Washington. Of course, we know today it seems like no matter who we send there, they sort of go downhill. So we got to fix that problem. We got to fix that problem. But Our next speaker, Nathan Dahm, it was just a joy when I listened to, I watched videos of symphonies a lot, and Beethoven's Ninth, the Oslo Symphony, has this flute player. If you read the email, you saw his picture. Well, spit an image of Nathan Dahm. So I got to put that in the newsletter. I may put it up in his office someday. And tell him that the check they've been sending to that guy, it really belongs to Nathan. Yeah. So it's a privilege to have Nathan. He's an Oklahoma treasure because he is consistently 100% on all the conservative ratings, and he's a man who can be trusted with the office. He will not bend. And so if you would, I don't want to cut into his time anymore. Come on up, Nathan. Let's give him a big hand.
Thank you very much. Please be seated. Please be seated. It's an honor to be with you all. I apologize for being late. Senator Bergstrom will tell you we were voting on the floor until 11:50. And Sharon will tell you that we ran down the stairs and jumped in the car. And I won't admit if I bend those speed suggestions or not. But we got here quickly. Actually, the last bill that we had was one of my bills, and it did pass. So I passed my bill and jumped in the car and came to join you all, and it's great to be with you guys. So thank you for having us. It's always an honor. OCPAC has been such a huge influence in Oklahoma politics over the years, and it's exciting to see how much it has grown and how involved you all have been over the years. I do want to say to Charlie, because I know this has been something that Charlie has done for years and everything, thank you for your leadership and everything you do. Although I am a little disappointed, I can't believe that you forgot your college roommate Plato's name. I mean, that's just a little surprising. So, just a little humor. I'm trying to say Charlie is old, okay? If you didn't understand it. But Charlie, you've done so much good for this state, so thank you for your leadership with that. Yes, please give Charlie another hand. Yes, he's been phenomenal. So we are at the point in session right now where last week was the final week to have bills heard in committee. So any of the bills that were not granted a committee hearing are technically dead for the remainder of the session. There's always ways for bills to come back and different things. It's unlikely, but it is possible. But essentially, all those bills are finished for this year. So I know several of the bills that were in the newsletter were my bills that were not granted a hearing. That doesn't mean that they're totally finished. I'm trying to see if there's other areas that we can insert that language. There's a group of us conservatives that really have a few things that we're pushing and fighting for. We are thankful for what we did get accomplished because I had 3 pro-life bills that were heard and passed committee, including Senate Bill 612, which I know Bob included in the newsletter, and I know that the House is advancing measures as well. And so we have had some great gains. Unfortunately, not every bill was heard, so there were some things that should have, in my opinion, been heard, but were not. And with Representative Olson, he's always been great to work on. He mentioned the licensure bill. That was actually my bill that we passed, that Governor Fallon vetoed. And whenever I mention Governor Fallon, I like to say that it's nice with Governor Stitt to finally serve with a Republican governor, for what that's worth. I will say that I did have the most vetoes of anyone under Governor Fallon. So that is, I guess, a badge of honor. I would have much rather she actually signed the bill that would have saved the lives of the unborn, especially when she promised. When she promised, I was in the room in the governor's conference room on the 2nd floor when she committed to signing that, and then she vetoed the bill. So there's a whole story behind that with everything that took place with that, but that's very unfortunate. But it is a much different environment at the state capitol with Governor Stitt there, and especially in the Senate side with a lot of these new freshmen who are much more conservative than the members that they replaced. So I feel like there is quite an opportunity this year to actually get some conservative legislation advanced and to actually stop some less than conservative measures. Just, I believe it was yesterday, we stopped an expansion of the texting while driving ban that one of the Democrats was running, and just today we stopped an expansion of seatbelt requirement on the floor. So there have been some bad things that we have stopped, which we haven't always seen that in the past, that the bad things have been stopped as well. So, so there is a real opportunity here in Oklahoma to keep Oklahoma going and make Oklahoma go in a more conservative direction. So I am very optimistic for what is ahead of you. I do just want to mention something, and then I actually prefer to do Q&A, so I'd like to answer questions. But I just want to give you, some of you, I mean, I see a lot of familiar faces, but some of you might not know my background. I've been in the state legislature for 8 years now. I am in my final term now. I'm officially term limited, which means I can say and do whatever I want, which usually at the Capitol solicits the same response, a little chuckle, and then people say, you mean you haven't been doing that the last 8 years? Which I have, because I will say or do whatever I want, because I'm not in this for the popularity contest aspect of it. I'm in this because I believe in conservative principles, in the Constitution, and biblical principles. That's what I'm about. But I am now in my final term, and I am very optimistic about what's before us. But a lot of people don't know the path that I came to get involved in government. I actually grew up overseas. My parents are still missionaries in the Eastern European nation of Romania, which was under communism for decades, like most of the Eastern Bloc. We moved to Romania in 1994, several years after the fall of communism, but it was still a very communist environment. In fact, the vice president under the dictator during communism was the then president, because the dictator was killed and he became the president of the now free country of Romania. So it was still very communistic. And so I saw a lot of what communism does. I've seen socialism firsthand. I've seen massive inflation. At one time, Romania had the second worst inflation in the world. So I've seen that. So that's why I'm a fiscal conservative. That's why I have concerns about the national debt now passing $26 trillion. In fact, that was one of the main catalysts that first got me involved in government, was the out-of-control spending from Washington, D.C. So for me, when I look at these things, I absolutely am a anti-communist. I hate communism with a passion. It is not just a system. There is an evil spirit behind that is pushing that. It's not just a system of government. It is a terrible system, absolutely, but there are evil influences that are pushing for that. So I am absolutely anti-communist, but I am very pro-Constitution, because I believe that the Constitution is the best governing document we have ever seen in the history of mankind. It's not perfect. It's been amended over the years. Improvements have been made, but it was the best document and has remained the best document in world history. So I'm a strict constitutionalist, but at the same point in time, I always like to mention this, and I know I'm probably speaking to the choir here a little bit about this, or even preaching to the preachers, because you all are probably sharing the same thing, but I go back to the Declaration of Independence. And this is something that I often try to remind fellow members at the legislature, because we have these conversations often about what is a core function of government. Especially at the state level, we'll talk about roads and bridges, we'll talk about health care, we'll talk about education, we talk about all these things about are these core functions of government or not. And you can make the case on certain things if they are core functions of state government versus federal government. But the thing I always try to bring it back to in the Declaration of Independence is it says that we're endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We all know that, but we don't teach our young people, and we often forget that the very next line says that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. So why are governments instituted? To secure these rights. So what is the core, main, principal function of government? It's to secure our rights. So everything we do should be looking at through the lens of, are we securing people's rights? That's the core, main function of government. So as we talk about all these other things, are we securing those rights first and foremost? Are we infringing upon people's rights? What is this actually doing? Sometimes there's things that don't infringe upon rights one way or the other. If it's deciding if a board is going to have 9 people or 11 people, okay, that's not really going to infringe upon rights unless we're going to spend more money by taking money from the taxpayers. But generally there's things like that yes, there's a few things that don't really impact that, but for the most part we can look at it and say, does this bill expand or retract people's rights? And so that's my main focus at the state capitol. So I actually introduced more bills this year than I ever have before. I introduced the most. I think Senator Bergstrom was second most. So he's also trying to advocate for these conservative principles. And right now, at last count, I think I have 27 bills still active that passed committee. I think 5 of those are sunsets, eliminating some different agencies and defunct positions and different things like that. But for the most part, most of those are to protect people's rights. For instance, the bill that we passed right before we came here was a bill to prohibit red light cameras here in the state of Oklahoma. Because red light cameras have a huge Sixth Amendment issue. Because the Sixth Amendment says you have a right to face your accuser. How are you going to face a camera that's accusing you of violating a red light, right? And there's been many lawsuits. In fact, the Missouri Supreme Court, there was a lawsuit on it, and they said it's unconstitutional because it's a violation of your constitutional rights to face your accuser. So there's things like that that people don't realize, that sometimes other people at the Capitol will think, well, that's not a battle worth taking. But one of my biggest frustrations that I've seen within the Republican Party, and even sometimes with conservatives, is there seems to be this mantra, and I know it's not here at OCPAC, but with other Republicans, with other conservatives, the mantra seems to be, well, that's not the hill to die on. Have you all heard that phrase before, right, from other people? That's not the hill to die on. Well, I've been in the Capitol for 8 years, and I've had a target on my back for 8 years, and they haven't killed me yet. Yes, they killed some of my bills, and I fought some battles, and I've lost some battles on some hills, but I've fought on a lot of hills. And we've made some huge victories because of that. But if you don't fight on a hill, and the other side is, guess who wins that hill? I mean, look at where we're at in the culture wars. It's not a culture war because we never really engaged in it. That's why the other side has won. That's why we have to engage. That's why when they're way over here on the left, pulling us to this extreme, and we're just saying, no, we're going to hold our ground here. Well, then they start to pull us that way. But if we're over here saying, no, we're going over here, then maybe we will stay where we're at, or maybe we'll gain some successes. But for too often, we just avoided those fights. So I encourage you to get engaged. There are a few bills that were not heard this year that I know that the conservatives really want to be heard. I know Senator Bergstrom had a bill for Save Women's Sports. Biological men should not be participating against biological women. Yeah. That's pretty much common sense, but the problem with common sense is that it's an oxymoron because it's not common to have that sense apparently, right? So that's a bill that was not given a hearing, unfortunately, but hopefully we will still be able to get that back, or get that passed. On the Senate and the House side both, we had bills dealing with critical race theory. Have you heard about this? Yes. Yeah, I'm sure you all have been called racist just like I have, because right now everything is racist apparently. And it's ridiculous that we're allowing this to be used and taught in our schools and in government. So on the House side, they had a bill that would have prohibited it from being used in schools. My bill on the Senate side would have prohibited it from being used in any area of government, not just schools, but in state government, county government, just across the board. We're not going to use that in government anywhere in the state of Oklahoma. Unfortunately, neither of those bills were heard, but again, we're still looking for a way to be able to get that passed because I know that's something that people are passionate about, and this is something that we can't just keep rolling over in the culture wars. And I know there's people that have said, well, if we vote on that bill, if we hear that bill, we're going to be called racist. Hate to break it to them, but they're being called racist anyways, right? So you might as well do what's right, and you're still going to be called names, right? So there are some things like that we are still fighting for. Those are a few things that didn't pass, but we are working on a lot of good, solid, conservative measures that will protect people's rights. I know Don Spencer's here. I have quite a few Second Amendment bills. We do have Senator Bergstrom and I and Bullard and Hamilton all had bills to create Oklahoma as a Second Amendment sanctuary state. So we all had those bills. We all got behind Senator Hamilton, incorporated different pieces of all of our different legislations, and his bill, Senate Bill 631, did go through committee. It is on the Senate floor, available to be heard. So that is a very positive thing. I actually, in speaking with one of my county sheriffs, actually Tulsa County Sheriff, he heard about what Missouri has done in allowing their county sheriffs to arrest feds that try to confiscate firearms, and he wants to see that language as well. So there's a growing movement with the sheriffs to support the Constitution. So there are a lot of things out there. There's a lot of possibilities. We have to get every bill through by the next Thursday. So I encourage you to be contacting your state senators, your state reps. I know you all are anyways, but do it again. Contact them. Ask them to be supporting these bills, especially as Bob sends out the newsletter, to make sure we get these passed by next Thursday. So I think Bob told me to cut it off at 12:40, so I have about 7 minutes. Does anybody have any questions I could answer or address? Yes, sir.
The city of
Hey, Joe, I
Norman,
gotta have a mic here.
the city of Norman, Oklahoma City, and I think Tulsa have passed city mandates forcing the citizens to wear masks and so forth, which is an egregious violation of the Constitution. So is forced testing, so is forced vaccines. I protest every Wednesday and Friday with Misty Panuelos, who I'm sure you met. All those things. We protest from 4 to 6 p.m. on Wednesday and Friday. Is there anything being done at the State House level to stop all that insanity?
Thank you for that question. I promise I didn't plant that question. I filed bills on all three of those things, and others touching those as well, but I had a bill to preempt cities or counties from doing mask mandates. I had a bill to prohibit contact tracing without a warrant, and I had a bill that would not allow for forced vaccines. And then I also had a bill that said that government could not deny you services for having or not having a vaccine, or wearing or not wearing a mask. Unfortunately, none of those bills were given a hearing. I will say one of the committee chairmen had said that he would rather wait until next year when things aren't as controversial. So
What's his name?
I'm still looking around for that one.
You want to know his name?
So
Or not.
on the critical race theory bill and on the no masks, those were all waiting for next year. Those were assigned to General Government Committee, and then the vaccine bills were Health and Human Services. So both of those chairmen had said that they wanted to wait. They prefer to wait till next year on those things.
We have a question over here.
Yeah, I think I had read somewhere that you also had a bill trying to prevent minors from being able to have access to puberty blockers, surgeries, things like that for transitioning. Was that one of your bills as well, and what happened with it?
Correct, yes, I had that bill. Senator Hamilton also had a similar bill. His was at age 21, mine was at age 18. I think his had a stiffer penalty than mine. I had that bill last year as well. It wasn't granted a hearing last year either, and it was not granted a hearing this year as well. So, like I said, there was a lot of really good bills that I felt like should have been given a hearing this year that were not, and one of the reasons that's given at the Capitol is, well, we don't want to do that this year, let's wait and do it next year. But the excuse next year will be, well, it's an election year, we can't do anything controversial because then, the electorate might get mad at us. So it just kind of flips back and forth every year. It's always, I sometimes joke that the new motto of the legislature that has control as Republicans should be, we'll do reforms next time. Because a lot of times they just want to push it off until the future. And I will say there are a lot of members that are getting tired of things getting pushed off and really do want reforms. There's a growing discontent with members. So that's why I think we are seeing more this year than we ever have. Still not as much as I'd like, but I will appreciate the victories that we have received so far this year. Bob, is there another question?
Anybody else? Let me get you a mic. If you have a question, hold your hand. We only have a couple minutes left, but I'll know where to walk.
No, not you.
How do we find out how our representatives and senators are voting?
So you can go to oklegislature.gov or okhouse.gov or oksenate.gov, and there's a bill search feature. And so whatever the bill is, you can type in the bill number, like Senate Bill 631, I'll use as the example, which is the Second Amendment Sanctuary Bill, and it has the history of the bill. When it was assigned, what committee it went through, the committee votes, any amendments, and you can look on there's a tab that says votes, and you can go and you can check that. And I will say, one thing that I am proud of that I was able to get accomplished, it used to be on the Senate side that they did not publish the committee votes on the website. I asked for that to be added. We added that, I think, 2 years ago. So now you can see committee votes and then when it goes to the floor, you can see that online as well. Yes, sir.
Good morning, good afternoon. I heard that there was a bill that was brought forth that if our legislators considered an executive action unconstitutional, we would null it. Is there such a bill, and did it pass?
So I was working on language to try to introduce into 2 of my existing bills, because I had heard about the North Dakota and South Dakota language. But I wasn't able to get my bill heard. But on the House side, Representative Jay Stiegel had a bill. Do you remember the number? 1236. House Bill 1236 on the House side. And they also had a resolution asserting something similar. So we are working with Representative Stiegel. In fact, Senator Bergstrom and I just met with him last night talking on some of this. So there are, that bill is still available. And that bill actually has the Speaker of the House's name on it, Speaker McCall, so that does stand a much higher probability of actually making it all the way through the process. So,
Okay, one last question.
These bills that aren't being heard, how can we best help make them hear these bills? I mean, of course we can contact our senators and reps, but is there another way that we can help compel these bills to be heard?
I mean, there's a lot of different ways. That's a lot to unpack. The main thing is the committee chair has the sole discretion on if they're going to hear the bill or not. And so we need more conservatives as committee chairman. I'll just say it. I was the chairman of the General Government Committee, but because I haven't voted for tax increases and other things with leadership, I'm no longer that chairman. If I had stayed in as chairman, I would have heard my own bill to not allow the cities to pass mask mandates. So that's part of the problem, is depending on who is in that position and that role. That's the way the system is set up. I don't like that system. I've tried to change that system, but it's really just a numbers game. So if we get 25 senators that are all passionate saying, we don't want vaccine mandates, mask mandates, we want to defend the lives of the unborn, passionate about that, then it'll be easy. Until we get those numbers, though, it's going to be an uphill battle because it's solely a numbers game. So trying to get people on board with that, that's the number one step for it. So, all right, and it is, wow, 12:39 and 30 seconds. I'm done 30 seconds early. All right, so I'll stick around a little bit afterwards if I can, but I have bills up at 1:30 when we're in session, so I need to make sure to get there so that they don't skip over my bills, so I want to make sure to get them heard. So thank you guys for having me. I'm on social media, and then I will say this, I do have prayer magnets. Sharon, did you grab those? Did you find that? If you want to grab one of those, it has my contact information on it. You can stick it on your fridge. Just say you'll pray for me one day a week. You pick the day. Hopefully it'll serve as a reminder for you to pray for all your elected officials. I greatly appreciate your prayers. Thank you. God bless you all.
Well done. Well done. When the Lord Jesus Christ looked at his disciples just before he left, he said, all authority, all power in heaven and earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of the nations. And that's what's going on right here. So God bless. And to make this happen more and more, we need fire in our pulpits. Fire in our pulpits to enliven the pews, to move the culture. I'm going to ask Alan Leffler, who's on our executive committee, to come up and introduce our next speaker. So if you would give a warm welcome to Alan Leffler.
Bill Price is an attorney, has been an attorney in the litigation department of Philip Murrah Law Firm. He continues to run his family oil and gas business. Bill received his undergraduate degree from Georgetown University School of Foreign Service and his law degree from the University of Oklahoma. He served as an assistant to Judge Alfred P. Murrah. Anybody heard of that name? Bill was assistant and then U.S. attorney for the Western District of Oklahoma all the way from 1975 to 1989. In 1990, Bill was the Republican nominee for governor. Bill has received numerous honors and awards for his prosecution of the County Commissioner corruption scandal largest political corruption case in the nation's history, and for his work in drug prevention. For those of you who braved the ice storm to come to the Tom Daxon session back in October, Bill was featured as one of the head speakers for Tom Daxon, a lifelong friend. He was born and raised in Oklahoma City. Bill lives here with his wife Mary. Bill has 2 daughters and a son. James, the son, is here with us. Welcome, James. He's a member of Christ the King Catholic Church. They have been in Oklahoma a long time. He's a part of many boards, mainly for working for education and children. He is here today to give us a unique perspective on education and school choice. We will further hear about that topic next week, I think, when Governor Keating speaks to us. Give a warm welcome to Oklahoma native Bill Price.
What is school choice? It is the inherent right of a parent to decide where their child goes to school. Amen. And it's not dictated by the government or by the zip code that they live in. It is a basic, fundamental right to be able to choose the school that best meets the needs of their kids. And that is, in many ways, educational, the superior school for an educational point of view, but it's also for religious and civic reasons. It is found that of the 124 schools in Oklahoma, most of them are religious, and they're filled to the brim during this period of time by parents fleeing the public school system and trying to get a religious education for their children. And the way we're going to turn around this society is through the young, through a combination of religious schools and schools that teach civics the way it should be, that Senator Dahm was talking about. It is also where your child fits emotionally. Epic School has 30,000 kids. They say that 50% of their kids are there because they were bullied. A huge number of the special needs kids in this state, is just so heartwarming to hear the stories of those families that they were almost ready to commit suicide because they were stuck in a school which didn't treat their kid properly. And they had no choice before the Henry Scholarship. And now they do. And it has changed their lives. Fundamentally, every child has the right to an education, but not necessarily a government-provided education. And the rich right now have school choice. And I think it is the middle class and poor that don't have school choice because they can't afford to send their kid to a different school or move to a different zip code. The public is appalled by the hypocrisy of our leaders. The union official in California that advocated closing the schools takes his kids to a private school at the same time. The governor of California has kids in private schools, as does a huge portion of our Congress. The last president that sent his kids to a public school was Carter. And yet they advocate that we don't have choice. in this increasingly woke culture, where our schools of education, where the Biden administration is advocating transgender rights, and all kinds of things, are driving parents, along with the closure of schools, toward school choice. It is the right time. There's been a huge number of bills filed because of those parents' concern. What are the different forms of school choice? One is open transfer. There's a couple of bills, Hughes and McCall has open transfer. This is open transfer to a different public school. At least it creates some competition between different public schools. And it will probably pass. It has got an excellent chance. The other form is charters. And the charter schools are public schools, but they don't have union teachers. And it makes a huge difference in terms of the quality. Over 50% of the schools in Oklahoma City are F schools. A majority of the schools in Oklahoma City that are charters are A's and B schools. There is a huge, in the A's and B schools, the charter schools can be closed. Those F schools have been F schools for 20, 30 years. And they have no chance for those kids. The third kind is the Henry scholarships. And that's 90% of the cost. That's a direct voucher. And we won in the Supreme Court unanimously that was proper even for religious schools. And the Henry scholarships allow special needs kids to go to a school of their choice. It also applies now to foster care kids. And foster care kids, we need to get out the word, and we're working on that to try to get more knowledge out there among the foster care community that is included. And there's been a number of bills to include other populations in that Henry scholarship. The third kind is the tax credit scholarships. And we have here today Hopper Smith, who's president of the board of the Opportunity Scholarship Fund, and the executive director, Sarah Guardiola. And I was worried about saying her name. There's 124 schools that qualify for the tax credit scholarships. Unlike even the myth, you've heard the myth, well, there's no private schools in Oklahoma. 86% of the students in Oklahoma live within 30 minutes of a private school. There are 25 counties that have Christian schools of all kinds that are filled to the brim and are overflowing. They have to turn people away. Those will greatly increase if we raise the cap. And let me understand how this works. People donate up to, and they get a tax credit, not a deduction, up to $2,000 per family, and they get $100,000 for a business to donate to a tax credit organization like Hopper and Sarah's. And they are able to provide a scholarship up to $5,000 or even 80% of the cost of education to kids in their schools. This has been a program that has a cap now of $5 million. Give you an idea, Florida has a cap now of $1 billion. We are minuscule in comparison. We've reached the cap the last few years. All kinds of innovative schools depend on this. Cristo Rey, when they came to Oklahoma, or were considering Oklahoma, they said, if you didn't have a tax credit scholarship, Bill, we wouldn't come here. You're too small. But that makes the difference on a program that is wonderful, that takes poor kids, has them work in the community, and work their way through school. It is also Positive Tomorrows for homeless kids, is dependent upon those tax credit scholarships, and they're becoming less and less dependent, more and more dependent, as this cap is reached every year. There's a bill by Tony Hasselblatt to raise that cap from $5 million to $10 million, and actually it's really more like $20 million, because innovative programs in the public schools can be a recipient of this, and if that's not used up, the other $10 million can go for that. Also, in that bill is an inclusion of military and veterans, in addition to the kids that are meet a certain poverty level, and that's a really high poverty level. It amounts to $130 some odd thousand per family of four. So it is a wonderful bill that has real good chances, because it came out of committee and it's due to go to the House next week. It is 2701. There's the final type of school choice, which is what we're ultimately aiming for, is what's called ESAs, which are education savings accounts. That would be a universal system where every parent could go to a public school or private school or charter school and be able to have the payment go to the school. And if there's a leftover amount, it could accumulate and ultimately pay for college. It is what's being passed throughout the country. And we're behind in Oklahoma for a major reason. The unions and the superintendents oppose any form of school choice. And if I've heard it once, I've heard it many times, the total myth that school choice takes money from the private schools. From the public education system. The fact is, OCU Business School did a study, and the state, for every person that contributed to the scholarship fund, the state saved $1.50. And actually, it was $3 when you include the local portion of that. It provides more money per student for education. And this fixed cost is minuscule in comparison to the savings that we're talking about, because all these programs are a lot less than what the public schools spend per student, and that savings inures to the state. Why are we for school choice? It could be because it provides superior education. There's 142 studies nationally of school choice programs, and almost all of them have concluded that it had a positive effect, not only on the students, but on the public school system, because they had to compete. They couldn't just force people to stay in their schools. Secondly, they have and they don't cherry pick, and that's another myth. Most of these studies are ones in which you have a random lottery in which you compare the students that won the lottery with the other ones. And it comes out incredibly favorable. Number two, religious and civic values. I really think this is important to this group. If we're going to change around our culture, we can't just nip at the edges. We've got to change the culture at where it starts, which is the youth. And religious values and civic values change incredibly with these schools. It builds character. It builds responsibility. It builds civic values. It builds religious values. It is the way to change America for the positive. It is a difficult program to put across at the beginning, but at the end, it is incredibly popular. At the beginning, all you have is superintendents that don't want to lose the money, and union members that don't want to have to, they're not unionized in private schools and in charter schools, and they don't like it. And they don't like open transfer because it makes them accountable. So it becomes incredibly popular later on. I'll give you an example. In Florida, 45% of the students go to choice schools. With us, it's like 5%. And it made, if you looked at the polling in Oklahoma, 79% of the Republicans and about even on the Democrats were in favor of school choice. So it's popular in Oklahoma, but there is not the fervor there is coming out of the superintendents and the unions. And the problem is we need to activate those parents. And when they see the effect of school choice, they're activated. It was an interesting statistic in Florida, and may be why Trump carried Florida. Don Santos ran against a black candidate for governor. And he got 18% of the black women of Florida, which was an incredibly high percentage. And they were polled, and the reason was that the black candidate was not in favor of school choice, and DeSantis was. That is incredibly popular once they see the effect on their kids. So in Florida, Democrats and Republicans alike support school choice in overwhelming numbers. And we are at the cusp of increasing that popularity bit by bit. As each of these programs takes effect, we gain a little more parents. We gain a little more business community in Cristo Rey. We gain a little more of a knowledge and understanding of what this means. And we're able to ultimately turn the corner. But it takes brave legislators, because a lot of these issues, you don't have any pushback. But if you're in rural Oklahoma and your superintendent said, or you have 5 superintendents, they're the best paid people in the entire county. In fact, the union superintendent is retiring on a pension of $178,000. And they're the wealthiest people in your community, and they say they're going to run somebody against you. if you support school choice. It used to be the county commissioners were the most powerful entity in Oklahoma. Superintendents are now the most powerful entity. And that's the reason why it is so hard in rural Oklahoma, or at least outside Oklahoma City and Tulsa, to get almost all the representatives and senators on board, because that is a difficult issue for them. Now, as more and more kids sign up for school choice, and as you see school closures and see the woke environment of many public schools, that is beginning to change. And the number of kids that are involved in these programs. And you see the effect. It will be a slow process, but it needs to be a much more rapid progress. It is the most important conservative issue of our time. It will affect future generations of Oklahomans more than anything that the legislature passes. And you can find out more detail on the scholarship fund from Sarah and from Hopper. And with that, I conclude. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. The bane of American culture is government schools. And those of you who read the OCPAC newsletter last week saw where I mentioned, I think it's common knowledge that in our government schools we teach the theory of evolution. And you read the story of Jeffrey Dahmer, a serial murderer. He tortured people and killed them. And after they caught him, he said, I did it because I thought there's no God, and I've been taught that evolution is a fact, and what does it matter? Your tax dollars are going to fund criminals. It's evolution. The theory of evolution is the foundation of criminal behavior. And I also quoted my favorite author, Dostoevsky. I read Brothers Karamazov when I was a teenager, was fascinated by it. And you find out at the end of the book, Smerdyakov the servant says to Ivan, the so-called intellectual and atheist, Nathan, thank you, thank you. Ivan the intellectual, so-called, I call it pseudo-intellectual. If you're an atheist, you're a pseudo-intellectual. You're not an intellectual. And they wondered who killed Ivan's, the Karamazov father, and he said, we did. He said, you taught me that there are no absolutes. And so I killed your father. There are no moral absolutes. And then Ivan is shocked. Because most atheists, as a matter of fact, I will say no atheist can live in consistency with their mythology of atheism. They cannot do it. That's what we teach in our government schools. That has to change. And Bill Price, thank you for the work you're doing. And thank you for what you said today. Jim Olson, thank you. I appreciate you being here. These people have to go back to work. As a matter of fact, you're on my time clock. You better get to work there. So next week we have Governor Frank Keating. Former Governor Frank Keating will be our speaker talking about higher ed. But I'm sure he will also say something about our educational bill. Steve Anderson crafted the bill a year or so ago that the governor's helping us run with floor leader John Eccles that allows a student in the inner cities the opportunity to transfer to a public or private school of his choice. And again, as is mentioned, superintendents and union people don't like it. And I was interested when he said the county commissioners used to be the highest paid or most powerful. And I'm thinking, yeah, they used to be because you put 100 of them in jail. And so Frank will talk some about that next week. We'll see where that bill is and talk about higher ed. Senator David Bullard has run some bills saying that, you know, really, please don't teach our kids homosexuality, lesbianism, Marxism when we send them to our universities. Could you just not do that? And so he has a bill. That's not exactly what the bill says. They have professional bill writers to make it sound better. So that's our meeting next week. We'll meet right here. And am I right, Alan? We meet right here. And so, again, Bill Price, thank you so much for being with us. It was just a pleasure. Question?
There seem to be a lot of bills that I need to know what's happening. Is it my job then, as a citizen, to go on the internet and look and see will it have all the different bills that are coming up? I can't wait for you to do it. It's not your job. But I need to know, and if that's where I find it, I'll make copies and pass them out to people. I don't know what to do, but I need to be calling about all these things.
Well, it is your job to tell all of OCPAC, and I've been wondering where you were. You are sort of dependent on what we share in our newsletters. We try to highlight the key ones, but there are a lot. So maybe I should list a list of all the really good bills, and there are a ton of really good bills. Charlie.
If I can just share a concept there.
Charlie, could you talk for about 15 minutes here?
Just 2 minutes here. There's right now 160 or so people in this room. If each one of us had one particular bill we're passionate about, and we called our lawmaker about it, and they got one call on that bill, how effective would that be? But if we have someone who is telling us which bills we need to focus on, and they get 160 calls, do you see the impact? That's a multiplied effect there. And the reality of it is there's only so much energy citizens have. And so it's really important to pick out those most important bills, let Bob publish those, and that's the ones we need to respond to. When I was the leader here, I felt like we only had the energy for about 3 bills a year. And you can't imagine how many people wanted me to talk about other bills. Now, Bob's a lot more energetic than I was. And so maybe we could do 10 bills a year now, or something to that nature. But from a strategic standpoint, you can't talk strategy publicly. Do you understand that? Yes. Because if you talk strategy publicly, your enemy measures you and they understand how you're doing it. So all I'm saying is, when this man puts an email out, and when he asks you to respond to something, that's what you need to do if we want to be effective. Thank you, Bob.
Well, we also have, and that's right, last year there was a horrible bill. They had hundreds of calls, thanks to many of you here. Hundreds of calls. That bill died a grateful death. We need to pass 2673. That's a House bill. And I would beg you to call all the legislators. Every legislator is listed in the last OCPAC newsletter. And I would beg you to call all those legislators. I'm not apologetic because I spend a ton of my own time. And, I don't know how much Charlie gets paid. I haven't got a check yet for what I do here at OCPAC.
I get twice that much.
It's twice. Yeah, I wonder where the money's going. I've been suspicious Charlie gets it. You have a question? Not really. The committee head's good, but they all have one vote on a committee. And now our bill is already out of committee. It's going to the floor. So that's why you have a list of every Republican legislator. And the reason I didn't include the Democrats is because I'm the guy that typed all those in with all the links. I thought, well, I'll drop off about 5 names by not naming the Democrats. So I just didn't name the Democrats. They might have more than 5. But when it's in committee, you call all the committee members. On the day before we gave the vote, I visited every committee member. Frank Keating called every committee member on their cell phone. Don't ask me how we got the numbers, but we got them, and he called them. Bob Funk had breakfast that morning with 6 of them. So, and we still barely got it through 8 to 7. Charlie.
And this is why it's really important for everyone in here to know who your personal state senator and your personal state rep is. Because while it's valuable to call all of these, it's 10 times more valuable when your personal state rep and senator hear from you. So that's your highest priority, and then you fan out to these others.
Yeah, that's
And put them, find out who they are and put them on your icebox so you don't forget their contact. Refrigerator, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you do need to talk to your personal rep. They will listen to you because, and when you call them, they'll ask you where you live when you call the Capitol. I mean, it really doesn't matter where I live, but if you live in their territory, yeah, they highlight that one. So, Brian.
I know it's on the OCPAC website, there's not a section for legislation. I'd be happy to work with you and publish on our website, UnitedLiberty.net. We'll have a list of all the legislation you need to support and who you need to contact and their contact info when you go to the website and stuff like that. That'd
That'd be great.
What do you charge? Because I don't get anything. I mean, are you like half of my salary? Done deal. Yeah, we'll do that. Thank you. That'll be great. That'll be great. Yeah, the gentleman who runs our website is not in the Oklahoma City area, and we're always not as current as we could be. But if you could do that, that'd be fantastic. So, anybody else? Okay, very good. Well, we're going to close in prayer, and I hope to see all of you. And hey, bring all of your friends to hear Governor Keating. He's a real treasure, and so happy. He is so excited about this bill. And we just hope to get a lot more people involved from folks who are high influence and also from people from the inner cities. By the way, if you know of anybody who lives in the inner city, Tulsa or Oklahoma City, who has children, who would love their children to go to a better school, I'd appreciate it if you'd email me, because we'd like to take them to the Capitol and have them explain to the legislatures. You know, I'm 6 years old. I go to an F school. It's been an F school. My grandpa, it was an F school when Grandpa went through. And he's in prison. And so is my dad. I'd like to avoid that. Could you give me an education? That's the testimony I would like in front of these legislators. We're going to close in prayer and hope to see you next week. Father, thank you so much for the move of your Spirit in each one of our lives. You've drawn us to Christ. You've drawn us to serve him. And I pray that you would empower us with wisdom as we continue to walk with you. And we just pray that you would bless us all, give us safe travel. And we pray that your kingdom would come and your will would be done on this earth as it is in heaven. In Jesus' name, amen.